college capital needs. Okay. All right. So now that we've got our sheet labeled here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some variables on the scenario here. So let's go up here and let's put some variables in there for this mock scenario. Let's say that the client that we have has two children. So I'm going to say child 1 and I'm going to say child 2. And then one of the, I'm going to put the name of the variable up across the top of this table. And so some of the important variables that we need to account for are the current age of the children. Let's say that child 1 is currently 3 years old and child 2 is 1, currently 1 year old. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the column here adjust to the width of the information in this cell really easily by going up to right in between the two columns and making my cursor look like an arrow to the left and the right and double clicking right in between, and it'll automatically adjust. I'm also going to center this here, so I'm going to click on the column and then I'm going to center this, or I can actually just click on these cells and I can click center up here, making sure I'm on the home tab to do this center alignment of the information. So I'll mention that as we go through this, we're basically going to be building a time value of money model to calculate how much this mock client will need to save each month for the goal of saving for their children's college education. And then actually what we'll do after that as well is we'll graphically demonstrate how the plan plays out on a timeline. And then that will kind of give us a really good idea that what we can present to the client. And what we'll do as well is we'll make sure that this file is professional looking. We'll make sure that we can make it look easy to understand and so on and so forth. So we have a scenario with, let's say we have a two-parent household, Okay, and they have two children. The children are currently these ages. We also need to know at what age will they start college. So let's say college age. And let's say that they both are going to start at the age of 18. And then another variable that we need is basically how long it will be until the child reaches the age of college. And so I'm going to say years till college. Okay. Now you'll notice that as I'm writing this here, it's reaching into another cell. So we can actually fix this. So, and one way is to do what we did earlier, which is to double click and make it wider. But another thing that we can do is we can do what's called wrap text. And wrapping text actually is a good thing to do as well when we have long amounts of text in a cell. So I'm going to double click these here to show. But I'm actually going to select this entire row, row 3, because that's the row I'm going to be putting variables in. And I'm going to go up here, I'm going to say wrap text. And then I'm going to say center. And I'm going to put it in the middle. Now, you can't really see much of things happening yet, but watch what happens when I actually move. Oh, I need to select it here. And I need to open this up here. Okay, and I'll close this column a little bit. Okay, so it actually wraps the text within the cell. So I'm going to move these just a little bit this way so that we can have the information there a little bit easier to understand. So this right here, the years until college, is simply just saying that this is equal to the age at which they're going to start college minus their current age. Okay, so we can do that, and then I can take my cursor, drag this little square down, and we now have the formula for both of them. The next variable we need to put in here is the actual cost of college. Now this is the current cost of college. Okay, so when we do the current cost of college, here the current cost of college, so this is just 1 year's worth of college. And we also need to identify whether it's tuition and fees, or whether it is tuition, fees, room, and board. In this case, let's just say that we happen to go out to the internet and we found out that we're just going to go off of tuition and fees, and the current cost of the college, the type of college that this particular mock client wants, is going to cost, let's say, $15,000. Okay, so we'll do 15,000, and there we go. Now I probably want to lay out some more of the details of the goal here. So we have a two-parent household. I'm going to insert a few rows here to put some details in here. Okay, and this two-parent household, they have a goal to pay, let's just say 100% of each child's college education. And we'll say tuition and fees, so we know specifically what we're looking at. So we know we want to pay for 100% of it for each of the children, and the tuition and fees that they're taking care of. What that means is that the room and board would then be under the responsibility of the children. Now let's also say that the children have the ability to attend a non-in-state, or I should say an out-of-state institution. Okay, so that's part of the reason why the cost of college is $15,000 a year. Sometimes it could be higher or lower, but let's just say that we have gone out to the internet and found out that the average cost of college for a particular institution out of state maybe was this. Okay. Now that can be different for various different scenarios, but let's just assume that. So we've got the first year. Now I'm going to say the current cost of college, and then I'll say first year. Okay, now that'll help us out a little bit to understand this is the first year, just the first year. All right, the next variable we need to identify is how many years the child is going to be in college for. Okay, so generally speaking, an undergraduate degree takes 4 years. But it's actually starting to take 5 years now for a lot of people. So let's assume that the years in college is going to be 5 years, okay, for each of the children, that the parents want to be able to cover 5 years worth of a college education. The next variable that we need to identify is what type of investment return are they going to get, and this one is before college. We will also have one during college. So before college, we'll say expected return before college. Now it's important that we understand that we're using the word expected return because this actually comes from how we calculate the expected return on a portfolio, an investment portfolio. So this right here is extremely important that that you understand it coming from the actual portfolio of the investments. But let's assume that the expected return on the investments is going to be 7% on average per year for their investment portfolio as they save for these children's education. Now the next thing is the expected return during college. Okay, so we need to make sure that we can identify what that's going to be. Now, that is actually, let's assume that they expect to get a return of 3%. Okay, let's say 3%. So what that means is before the kids go to college, they have a higher risk tolerance on the investment portfolio. But once the children get to college, they're willing to take on less risk. They don't want to risk the money during the years of college. Okay, so now we've got those variables. We're almost done with all of the variables. I'm actually going to put the next one is inflation. And so I'm going to put college inflation, and then I'm going to put CPI. And college inflation, generally speaking, has been around 6 or 7%. It varies kind of from year to year, but on average, let's just say that it's 6% for this particular scenario. Let's say we've gone out and we found out that the average inflation rate of the cost of this particular type of education that they're getting is about 6% a year. So the cost is rising at 6% a year. Now, CPI is the general inflation rate, and so let's just say that that's 3% right now. Now, I put this on here specifically so you can see it, but we actually will not really be using the CPI in the calculation that we do, because everything is specific to college and college prices, not to just the general prices of goods and services. All right, so I think we got some good variables on the table here. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to make sure that it's centered. I'm going to actually maybe highlight these and color the, I'm going to color this a little bit. Let's do this and color the white. There we go. And then something else we can do is we can actually take these here and put some borders around these. And we'll eventually have this looking a lot cleaner, but that's some things we can do to clean this up. We'll do this. We'll highlight this here, and what we'll do is we'll just put a general border around it, and maybe we'll highlight this color here. Kind of gives us our scenario. We'll insert a row here, and we'll say general scenario. We can call it that, something like that. Maybe bold that. So now we've got some variables in here. So the big question is, what is the monthly required savings? What is the monthly required savings? Now, what we want to do is we want to do this on a per child basis, okay? I'm going to bold these here. And so when we do that, so we're going to find out what the monthly required savings is per child. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say monthly required savings, okay? And that's where we're gonna do this per child. So we're actually going to have a specific number there. And then once we find that, we're going to just add them up, because when we add them up, that'll be the total. So this will be the total monthly required savings. We'll put this right here, and what we'll do is we'll do something like this. This will be equal to whatever the monthly required savings is for child 1 plus whatever the monthly required savings is for child 2. Okay, so we'll have an answer there that'll tell us how much they need to save per month. We'll also want to know what the cost of college is. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take column A, just move that over a little bit, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make a box up here that I'm going to put a large border around it. I'm going to do merge and center. That means it's going to merge it into one big cell. And this is going to be the, actually I'm going to undo that. Control Z, undo that. I'm going to select these cells here and merge those. And then do a border around that. And I'm going to merge these ones right here. I'm going to say total cost of college. Okay. And so what we'll see, we'll end up seeing a number that identifies what the total cost of college is when we get this all put together. Okay, so now we can actually dive into the time value money calculations. And again, we want to do this on a per child basis so that we can identify it very easily on for each child and then total things up. So I'm going to do the time value money calculation twice because I have 2 children, but I'm going to do it individually. So we'll start with child 1. So I'm going to say child 1. And the first step, there's 3 major steps that we need to do. And so the first step, I'll say step 1, is going to be calculating the first year of college. Okay, so what is that first year of college going to cost? And so we know what the first year costs currently, but we need to project this into the future out on this many years for each child. So child 1 out 15 years. So it's simply a future value formula that we're going to use. So we'll put our time value of money variables on the table here. So present value, rate, number of periods, the payment, and the future value. Now the future value is what we're solving for, and so I'm going to highlight this a little bit, and I'm going to actually take this and put a border around it, and I'm going to put borders in there. There we go. And this right here looks a little bit tight, so I'm just going to make these a little bit bigger. I'm going to do it that way. And then I can merge these, and I'll do this. There we go. So the first step is calculating the cost of college. Well, we know the present value is the 15,000, so we say this is equal to the 15,000, but we need to make sure that it is a negative number. Okay, so there, and that is the inflation rate of the cost of college. So that is the college inflation, and right there. And the number of periods is equal to how long it's going to take until college starts. And then the payment is 0. Okay, so 0 because we're just projecting out what the cost of college currently is to the future in 15 years. So we can say equals FV for future value. Now we're going to follow our formula here for calculating time value of money. First we need the rate variable, which is our I, then hit a comma and do the number of periods, comma, payment, comma, and present value. We do not need to worry about the type right now. The type actually is what we would use. For example, if I hit a comma, it's going to ask me for the end of the period or the beginning of the period. So by default, it assumes 0, end of period. We'll get to using this more specifically in step 2 when we get to that. But we want to use end of period, so we don't have to put anything in there in here. So we can get rid of that comma, close parenthesis, and hit enter. So what we're seeing is that the future value of $15,000 at 6% in 15 years is almost $36,000. So that's year 1. That's just the first year of college for child 1. So now what we need to do is do the same thing for child 2. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say child 2, and I'm going to copy this. Control C and Control V. So, but now I just need to identify the different variables, because if I double click on future value, it's already got these cells selected. Okay, so the present value, that's equal to child 2 here. I is going to be equal to child 2, and that's going to be the 6%. N is going to be equal to the 17, and payment is 0. So we see that for child 2, the first year of college is going to cost almost or just over 40,000. Oh, I forgot to put the negative sign in here. Okay, there we go. And then so we can take these and center them, and center these here. Here we go. So now what we've got is we've got the first year of college calculated. We now have to figure out, well, over the 5 years that the children are in college, what is actually going to be the present value of the entire cost of college. Okay, so this is step 2 is really the big question. So step 2. This is the question that most people want to know, the total cost of college. Okay, so I'm going to merge these here, open this up just a little bit. And so what I can actually do is I could copy this and paste it, but the total cost of college, what we're doing is we're actually calculating the present value of these 5 years. Step 1 was projecting out the current cost out 15 years for child 1. Step 2 is actually just saying what's the present value of the stream of payments for 5 years in college. Okay, so that's actually a present value function. So what we're going to be solving for is present value. So let's put in the other variables here. Future value, I in PMT. And so the future value of the first cost of college is, for child 1, is $36,000 almost. But that's not the number that we use. The future value is actually 0, because what ends up happening is at the end of college, when the child graduates, they don't want to have to be paying any more money, or they don't want to have any money in the account. They want it to be 0. Okay, so that'll be 0. Now this is a very important piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dash here, and this is going to say inflation adjusted. Okay, so what this means is that we need to make sure that we account for inflation, college inflation, with respect to the investment. Okay, so they're going to continue to invest the money during the college years, but they're not going to be receiving the full 7%. We have to adjust this for inflation. Okay, so here's what we do, and we use the expected return in college and the college inflation returns there. So for child 1, we come in here and we have to adjust this for inflation. So the way we do that is we say equals 1 plus the rate of return, okay, which is going to be 3%, and then we have to divide that by another 1 plus the inflation rate, okay, and then after all of that we subtract 1, okay, and we get a number. We're going to turn this into a percentage. And we'll take it out a couple of decimal places. So we see that they're basically going to be getting about almost a negative 3% return, and that makes a little bit of sense because if the cost is rising by 6% and you're only getting 3%, then you're basically losing 3%. So that's a general idea. Now, N is equal to the number of years that they're in college. Now the payment, this is where we have to tie this to the cost of college each year. So payment is going to be equal to this number here. And it's going to be positive because they're going to be paying out the money to the university or to whoever is going to pay for college. So enter. And then present value is what we're solving for. And we do the rate, the number of periods, the payment, the future value. Now, this is where we have to say comma 1, and we use the beginning of the period. Okay, and the reason why we do that is because you have to pay your college bill before you go to college, before the semester starts, basically. So at the beginning of the year, they're paying this money out. They're making this payment here instead of waiting until after you take the classes and then pay it. So we have to do this here. And we hit enter. And we'll open this up. So it looks like for child 1, and so I'm going to put here, this is begin mode. That's what we're going to do. Make sure we note that so that it's identified. So what we see here is that for child 1, it looks, let me see. It's going to be $190,000, just over $190,000 for the entire 5 years of their education. I'm actually going to come up here and put a negative sign up in front of the PV just to make it a positive number that way. All right, so now I can kind of clean this up a little bit and do a little bit of this here. I can center these and I'll do this. There we go. All right, so now I can do step 2 for the next child, for child 2. So copy and paste, and then I can just say these right here is going to be actually this number and this number. You can see I just drug those numbers, those colored cells up there that represent these here. And this, let's see, we want to have that equal to, we want this to be equal to this one here, because it could be different for each child. And then this number here is equal to this number. That came over just fine. And there we go. So we've got the right numbers in there. So, so basically, we now, if we were to change some of these variables, all of this would update. So for example, child 2, let's say child 2 went to an in-state institution, and it was going to cost $5,000 instead each year. Then that cost is going to automatically update as we were to change that. I'm going to hit Control Z and put it back to 15,000. Okay, the third and final step in this is to actually calculate the annual savings that are required. So that is step 3. That is annual saving, annual required savings. Okay. Just before we do that, let's actually come up here and do our total cost of college. I'm going to bold this. I'm going to just color that in. And so this is going to be equal to this plus this here. Okay. So, whoops, did I do something? I got it. Okay, 192. Okay. So it looks like for this particular household, I'm going to make this bigger so it kind of stands out as a big number. And we'll make it bold, and I'll make it a different color. Maybe green doesn't look all good, but maybe a red number, because red, that's a lot of money to pay for. I'll just do that. So basically, we see the total cost of college now, how much it's going to cost at the start of the education. Okay, so at the beginning of the education, they need to have this much money, and this is how you broke it down for each child. All right, so step 3, annual required savings. Let's merge that, and let's make this cell a little bit bigger so we can see that. There we go. Okay, the annual required savings is a fairly simple time value money calculation. We're basically trying to find now what does the payment need to be each year for us to reach the goal. Okay, and again, we want to make sure we identify this on a per child basis. So I'm going to select these and bold these over here. So let's put our time value of money variables on the table here again. When we want to solve for payment, that's what we're solving for. So we can do present value, future value, I, and N. Those are our variables that we have. So for child 1, what's the annual required savings for the cost of college? So this will be just for the $190,500. So the present value variable is actually representing current savings. Okay, so if they currently have a certain amount of money set aside, then you would put that number in there. Let's assume that for right now that there's 0, that they have no money set aside at all for either of these children for college. And so that's going to be 0. Okay. The future value, that is going to be represented by what the cost is of the total 5 years of college. Okay. Because at the very beginning, when college starts, they want to have all that money set aside, ready to go. Now, the number of periods, this is basically how many years until it gets to the beginning of college. And so we're going back to the number of years here until college. Oops, I need to say equals this. Oh, sorry, that's got to go in down here. And I, this right here is going to represent the expected return that you expect to receive on your investment. So this is going to be equal to this number here. Okay, now we can solve for payment. Equals PMT, open parenthesis. We have our rate, our investment return, our expected investment return, comma, number of periods, comma, present value, comma, future value. Okay, And this is going to be just in regular end mode. We don't put a comma 1 in here. All right. Now, the present value, I want to mention that if there was a number in there, then it would need to be negative. So don't forget that this would be need to be a negative number. All right, so we see that per year, this household would need to put about $7,500 aside each year. Okay. Now let's do this for child 2. So let's clean this up first. Let's go here. Let's clean this up a little bit. Make it look better. And there we go, something like that. And that's okay to have this negative number here. We can turn it positive if we want to, but we don't have to right here. But this being negative represents that each year the household has to take the money out of their pocket and pay it, put it towards the savings of college. All right, so let's do this for child 2 now. We got this here, and present value 0. This is equal to the total cost of college. I is going to be equal to the return, and N is going to be equal to the second child's years until college. There we go. So they need to put almost $7,000 for the second child. So now we can do the total. The total is going to be equal to the sum of these two items. Now these are negative, so I would typically have to say this number minus this number. Okay, and that, oops, I'm going to say plus. That's what I needed to do. There we go. Okay, we got $14,000 per year is basically what this household has to put aside if they want to pay for 100% of the child's college education, just the tuition and fees in this case. All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this and this. All right, and we'll bold it. Okay. So now what's the monthly savings required? Well, that's because investment returns typically happen on an annual compounding basis. Then we can simply just take the payment and divide it by 12. And we'll also make it so that it's not a negative number. So we'll say equals, and I'm going to say negative, and I'm going to say this number divided by 12. Okay, and then I'll say equals negative, this number right here divided by 12, and there we go. Now, one of the things we need to make sure we do from a professional standpoint is make sure that all of our numbers are properly represented in formatting. So these numbers, these are dollar figures. They need to be in a currency format, and since we're dealing with large numbers here, we typically don't need the decimal points. So we're not all that worried about the pennies. I mean, when we're talking about $400,000, no one's really worried about the pennies. So any dollar figures that are in this scenario, we're actually going to get rid of the cents, all of the pennies. So like for example here, we're going to reduce those, and we're going to go here, we're going to reduce those, we're going to come in here, reduce those, and we'll do that here as well. And the dollar figures over here, we're going to get rid of the pennies in here. We don't really need to worry about those. And anytime you really deal with percentages, you typically want to put it out 2 decimal places on the percentage. So for example here, we can see that it's 2.83% and not 3%. So we're going to actually take these percentages here that we have, and we're going to take them out 2 decimal places. Even though they show the 00, that's okay. We want those to be properly represented. So any percentages, let's take them out 2 decimal places so that we can have them consistent. Okay. So now we've got this actually all put together to where we can now see what the monthly required savings is for this particular household. So they need to put $1,200 away each month to be prepared for their children's college education. Now that may seem like a lot. It just depends on all the variables and that. So one other thing is the current savings. Maybe they already started saving for a child's college education, or maybe they want to actually designate some savings that they have somewhere else for college. So the last thing we're going to do is actually put in some current savings. So I'm going to take the monthly required savings. I'm going to move this over one column, okay? And I'm going to put in a variable here, current savings. All right. And let's say I'm going to highlight these two and want them to be a currency, okay? And we want to get rid of the 2 decimal places. All right. So let's say they currently have for child 1 that they want to let's say $5,000. Okay, let's say they currently have $5,000 saved, and for child 2, let's say they have $2,500 saved. All right. So let's clean this up now. And make sure these are centered, and this here. Okay, so that's now where we would bring in the current savings, and so this cell right here would be equal to, and it needs to be a negative number, negative 5,000 because this is child 1, and then this one here would be equal to negative this here for child 2, and there we go. So what that shows is that we currently have this much money. And you can see that as we entered that, the amount required each month went down slightly. So the more money they currently have obviously helps reduce the payment. So that is evidence of starting early is helpful. So I'm just going to clean up this a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn off the grid lines, which is really important to do whenever we're making something look a lot cleaner. So I'm going to go up to View and go to Grid Lines, and you'll see that those lines that were all here are gone. So that can help clean it up a little bit. So that's how you can produce the steps of the process to calculate what the monthly required savings is for a particular goal. I'm going to bring this in here. There we go. And so the monthly required savings for this particular household is about almost $1,200 a month. Okay, in this video, we're going to actually graphically demonstrate how to have the plan play out. Basically, year by year, what is the account value potentially going to look like when they put money in, they earn a return for the year, when they take money out, so that they can see graphically how their account value is going to look up until the time of college, and also how the money will be withdrawn throughout college. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another sheet here. Let's create another sheet, and we'll call this capital needs graph. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a graph. Basically, I'm just going to demonstrate this really quick. I'm going to turn the grid lines off and I'm going to draw this out a little bit. So basically the idea is that over time we want to see the account value increase up to the point to where then, let's say, the point of college. So this would be the point of college. And then after that, we would see the account value decline back to 0 until graduation. So that's the idea. We want to see a graph something like this is what we're going to build. All right. So I'm going to actually delete this first and turn the grid lines back on. It'll help us out. And so since we have 2 children in this particular case, we're going to do it for each child. So let's go to here. So here we go. So what we're going to do is we need to identify the year first. So the year, we'll start with the current year, which is year 0. Okay, and then we're going to identify the amount that is invested, or the account values, kind of as it goes throughout the year. And so at the beginning of the year, we want to identify what the account value is at the beginning of the year. We want to identify any withdrawals that would take place. So for example, if when they actually take money out at the beginning of college and each year. Then we also want to know what the investment return is, and the contributions that are made. So how much money is put in each year, and then at the end of year, the balance at the end of the year. So let's make these, open those up, and we're going to have everything be centered. So now we know, and this is going to be account value. Let's do this. Let's merge this, and we'll make it bold, and we'll say value for child 1. Okay, and we'll center that here. All right, capital child 1 is currently 3 years old, and they are looking to go to college in 15 years. Okay, so they're going to go to college in 15 years. So this will be 1, 2, so on and so forth, and I can select these and I can drag it all the way down to 14. Okay, now the reason why I want to do 14 is because this represents the end of the year 14. The 15th year is when they will actually begin college. So this here should be end of year 14, beginning of year 15, which should be the year that they actually go to college. And I'm going to actually add in one more variable over here, and that's age, just so you can see that, and that is going to be equal to the current age of the child. It's going to be here. Okay, and then this will be equal to this age plus 1. That makes 4, and then we should be able to drag that all the way down so that we can see all of the years. So we've got the 15 through 19 are the years in college. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm just going to highlight this. Those are the college years. And we're going to do this. We're going to merge this. So there we go. These are the pre-college years. We're going to just color this a little bit, make it a little different so we can work with it a little easier. Okay, so now the beginning of the year is equal to what their current value is that they have of savings. So it's equal to the current savings here, which is their, okay, so we hit enter, and that needs to be a positive number. So we need to go right after the equal sign, but before the apostrophe, and put a negative, and then it'll turn it into a positive number. Withdrawals, now these years, years 0 through 14, there's no withdrawals being made, and so that's going to be 0 because there's no money being paid to college yet. We'll see that when we get here. The investment return is now going to be equal to the money that they have in the account times the investment return before college. So that's our expected returns. We go to here, and we do the expected return there. Now, we're going to end up dragging this down on the, here, we're going to end up dragging this down, so we're going to need to anchor this here. So I'm going to go up here between H and the 7. I'm going to select there. I'm going to hit F4 on my keyboard, and that will anchor that number so that when I drag it down, it'll always multiply by that percentage that I have. Contribution, this is the amount of money that's put in each year. Okay, so because we're dealing with an annual compounding, we're dealing with years here instead of months. So contribution each year is going to be equal to, and this number right here is payment right there. And I'm going to actually need to anchor that as well because we're assuming that they're going to make the same amount of payment towards the savings each year. So go F4 and hit enter. And I need to make that positive. So we'll make that positive. Put a negative sign between the equals and the apostrophe and hit enter. Now it's a positive number. Now the end of the year balance, so the investment account at the end of the year will be equal to the sum of all of these cells here. Okay, hit enter. So at the end of the first year, they should have $12,383 roughly. So that is assuming that the contribution is made towards the end of the year, and that's what we have with our time value of money problem that we worked on as we were calculating the payment. It's an ending of the year calculation. We're not assuming that the contribution was made at the beginning of the year. All right, so now we can go to the second year, and the beginning of the second year will be equal to the end of the first year, or actually the beginning of year 1 will be equal to the end of year 0, or the current year. And then withdrawals, again, we're not making any withdrawals during the time of saving for college, so we can actually drag that all the way down here. The investment return, since we anchored the rate of return, we can actually drag this down here, and it will then multiply automatically by the beginning year's balance. And we can do that same thing with the contribution amount because we anchored that. We can drag that down. And then the end of the year we can also drag down. So now we have it all set up here. And we can take all of these and drag them all the way down to there. All right. Nope, we noticed that the withdrawals actually started counting numbers. So I just need to, I'm just going to go back and put that back in there. There we go. So we should have the number that should be at the end of year 14, or basically when at the end of the child turning 17 years old. It looks like they have $190,522. Is that the same as what we had before? Let's see the cost at the beginning of college. There it is, $190,522. Okay. So we can now see that for each year, we have the ability to look at the client's account and say, are they on track or are they not? So we can see if they're putting in the contributions every year, every month, actually, to total up to the annual contribution. Then we can see that they should be getting somewhat in the ballpark of these types of returns in here, and their account values at the end of the year should be approximately these. So that allows the advisor to look at their account value on at least on an annual basis and determine whether they're on track or not. Okay, now let's get into seeing how things play out when they actually start paying for college. And so this should come out to where we should have at the end of the year, of the final year, should be $0. That is the goal, to make sure that that is $0. So what we need to do is first we need to make this cell equal to the end of the previous year, just like we had before, and we'll drag that down. That'll be the same. Okay. Now we need to actually start accounting for the withdrawals. The withdrawals here, this is the cost of the first year of college. So that's going to be equal to what we calculated for the first year of college right here. Okay. And we hit enter. All right. Now, we're going to end up summing all of this together as we did at the end of the year. So this needs to actually be a negative number. So let's make this a negative number here, so that when we get the end of the year, we can just sum these up. Now the investment return, we can see that the investment return is the rate of return times the beginning of the year's account value. However, we have to keep in mind there's two changes here that happen when we get to actually withdrawing the money at the time of college and throughout college. First, we're no longer using the investment return that is prior to college, what we had here, the expected return before college. We're now using the expected return during college. So we need to make sure we account for that change. And the second thing is we need to make sure we account for the withdrawal that takes place at the beginning of the year, because they're taking the money out and paying for that year's worth of college. So we can do that by doing this, saying equals, and I'm going to do parentheses. I'm going to do this number, which is the beginning of the year, minus what they withdraw from the account to pay for the first year, close parentheses. And then I'm going to multiply that by the return during college right here. And I'm going to anchor that return during college and hit enter. Okay, so now I should be able to drag it down. The contributions, there's no more contributions being made. They're in college, so this is now 0. Okay, and then this should be the sum, just like it was before. Make sure that that stays the same color. Now I should be able to then drag these down, and I'll drag these down right here. Oh, and there we go. Let's see. Oh, I think I forgot to anchor something here. I forgot to anchor the, oh, we need to calculate each year's withdrawal. That's what we need to do. Okay, so the second year in college is going to be equal to this number here, but this number's got to be a positive number at the time of the calculation, technically, but we can multiply that by, open parentheses, 1 plus the inflation rate, okay, because the cost of college is increasing. So that's going to be our college inflation, and anchor that, and close parentheses, and hit enter. There we go. We should be able to drag that down, and let's see, what did we have go wrong here? I'm going to double check the formula over here. Let's see. One thing that you can do in Excel that's really neat whenever you're trying to find something that might not be working perfectly is you can hold down the control key on your keyboard and hit the little key that has the squiggly line just above your tab button. So if I hold down control and I hit the squiggly line button, it'll give me all the formulas that I have on the sheet, and I can scroll over here and I can look and see I've got the sum of all these cells here, which actually may not be correct, because I'm going to undo these, hit control and hit the squiggly line again. It may not be correct because we're subtracting out the 35 from the 190 and then adding back in the investment return. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make these positive numbers first. I'm just going to see if this will work. I'm going to delete that negative sign, make them positive, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say this is equal to the beginning year's balance minus the withdrawal, and then plus any investment returns, and then plus any contributions that would be made. So if any contributions were to be made, then that would be included. I enter, and then I should be able to drag this down, and there we go. We hit 0. Perfect. All right. So that's how we can produce a schedule of actually following the account balance over time to help the client see year over year how it would play out and how we can track it. Now, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to produce the second child's table, and I want you to do the same and see if you can get the same result as I do. Okay, so I've produced the table for child 2, and so I would like you to check and see if you've got something similar to this. Go ahead and produce it now if you haven't done so. So what you should have is basically, if we look at the age column, at age 18 they start their first year of college, and that's basically the 17 years away, because child 2 is currently 1 year old when we look at the current age of the child. And so we see that they have a beginning balance of $2,500. They're putting in just over $6,500 each year. And we've got the ending balances all here, and we see that the ending balance at the beginning of college, actually this right here should be up right here. There we go. Okay, so at the end of this final year, when they're 17 years old, and the beginning of their 18th year, that should be the same as what we got for the total cost of college, and we did. And then we got it down to zero, showing the withdrawals and paying for college all the way throughout those 5 years. So see if you can produce that as well. If you need to review the video to go back and see how we produced the first one to get the second one, feel free to do that. I'm just going to clean this up just a little bit. So for example, I see this right here. I'm going to get rid of some decimal places. The age is not centered. I'm going to center that. I'm going to center this one as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the grid lines. So I'm going to go to View, turn off the grid lines, and there we go. And to represent the end of the 14th year and the beginning of the 15th year, I'm just going to leave the color difference here. So I'm actually going to delete these here, and there we go. The last thing we need to do is now create a graph that will represent the total amount over time. Okay, to produce the graph, we're going to make this very simple and easy to do. And so whenever you are producing a graph, graphs are always based on some type of table or chart of information. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to type in age, child 1, and child 2. And actually I'm going to undo all the formatting in all of these cells. I'm going to go up here and go to clear all, and it'll get all the formatting out of there. So let's do age, child 1, child 2. It didn't do it for me. Let's do it this way. Clear formats. There we go. So let's do clear formats. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get the age. So this would be, for example, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So this would be equal to, we can do the age of the second child because the second child starts at age 1. And both of the children will finish at age 22. So we can, whoops, I forgot to, there we go. 22. One more. All right. And then we'll say that this one is equal to child 1, their ending year balance. And this will be equal to child 2's ending year balance. And then we can double click and have that go all the way down. Oh, child 2 starts at age 1 and child 1 starts at age 3. So child 1, they actually, there we go. There we go. Because child 1 starts at age 3, so their ending year balance is this at age 3. So now we have a very basic chart, or table I should say, and we can now just select the information to build a chart. So one way to do that is just simply just select all this information right here, and go to Insert, and go to a line graph. And we can see the line graph now is showing the accumulation of the savings and then the decumulation of the savings. So this is the same type of idea that we'll see in retirement, accumulating money for retirement and then drawing it down during retirement. So now this graph right here represents the ages down here on the bottom axis, the horizontal axis down here. And it's got the account values on over here on the vertical axis. So we're going to clean this chart up so that we can actually understand it a little bit better. So I'm actually going to delete this one. And I'm going to select some specific years that I want to show up on the graph itself. So I'm going to delete age actually because I don't want that to show up as one of those lines. Anything that's up here will be as one of those lines. So I'm going to select the first year and the title of the child, And then I'm going to select every few years down there. I'm going to hold my control key. I'm going to select year 4, year 7, year 10, year 13, year 16, year 19, and then I'm going to select year 21, and that'll be good. We can do that. And let's do insert, a line graph, and then what I can do is I can add in the data labels, and we'll be able to see the numbers on the graph. Now let's clean this up. I'm going to move my table. I'm going to take this, I'm going to move my table way over here. I'm going to drag it so way over here somewhere, kind of hidden a little bit, kind of out of the way. I'm going to bring my chart over here, and I'm going to actually make this chart a little bit bigger. Oop, not quite that big. I don't want to scroll. There we go. I want to make sure I don't have to scroll with my mouse here when I've got my final information. So there we go. I can see it all on one screen right here. The child 1. I can't quite see all of child 2, but that's okay. So here we go. We're going to clean this up here. So this title here, I'm just going to title this College Savings Over Time. Okay. And I'm going to actually change the type of the graph this is. I'm actually going to fix some of these numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the graph itself. I'm going to drag it over here so I can see it for right now. And I'm going to select these numbers here. And I'm going to go into the labels option. And I'm going to make sure that it's on above. I want it to be above the line. And then I'm going to select the blue one for child 1. So I'm going to select these numbers. These ones are for child 1, and I want to do below. So it moves them down a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to fix this axis here. I need to add some axis titles. So axis titles, add those in. And I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to say age. And over here, this is going to be account value. Okay. There we go. Okay, next what I need to do is I've got the titles on here. I've got the numbers spread out a little bit better. I've got age here. I need to fix how these numbers are showing up. So I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go to Axis Options. Make sure that this is from 0. That's right. Okay, and go down to Numbers. And I'm going to scroll down, and I want to make sure that the number is a currency. And I don't need the pennies in there, so I'm going to change the decimal places to 0 and have a dollar symbol. And then I'm going to hit Tab, and you'll see these are now over here numbers, dollar values. So that's what we need to have for there. I'm going to close this here. I'm going to bring this over here, and I'm actually going to change this kind of the look and feel of this chart. I'm going to go up here to Design, and I'm going to, let's see, do I like this one? That one looks okay. I'm going to also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the graph, click on this. Actually, I want to get these individual grid lines that are back here, make sure that they're selected individually. So not the box like this. I want to select the grid line back there, and I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to delete those, get those out of the way. Then another thing I can do is I can actually change the style of the back of this here if I wanted to. I could double click on there, and I can go to fill, and I could fill, you could say solid fill, and I could do it kind of as a different color if I wanted to. If I wanted to do that. Nope, those numbers won't show up all that well if I do a lighter color. So if I did a darker color, what might happen? So I could do something like that if I wanted to. I'm not really liking it all that much, although what I could do is I could do a border around it. I could do a black border or even a white border if I wanted to around it. So if I wanted to do something like that, I don't have to. I'm not really liking that, but we'll leave it for now. So that's how you can create the tables now for following the account values and build a chart to show the actual trend of the account values for when we're saving for a child's college education.